Hi, and welcome back to Team Spirit Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Carrie.
I'm
I'm
Lauren.
Emily. Oh,
Today, we are talking about something that I think really can be applied in any facet of life. It doesn't just have to be about spirituality, it can really be about anything in regards to your career or your hobbies in general. But I think it's something that a lot of us certainly do struggle with. I know I certainly have, and I'm sure everyone, Lauren and Emily, can both agree. Like it's something that we've all struggled with. But we're talking about imposter syndrome. And if you're like, well, what is imposter syndrome? I have come prepared and I have the definition, and then we'll kind of get into it. So, the definition of imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. So, basically, what this means is no matter how much knowledge you absorb, no matter how much you apply what you've learned, no matter how successful you are, you feel as though you are an imposter within your own work, that you're not good enough, that you're not deserving of your success. And I really think too, like the more validation that you get a lot of times, you would think could like cure that imposter, but I actually think it fuels it in so many ways. Would you guys agree with that?
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like on the scale of success, the higher, the more large that imposter is. So I think it's important today to, first of all, of course, like talk about our own experiences with imposter syndrome. But I think it's also important to talk about like how do we cope with that? Because I don't think it's curable.
No.
Yeah, no.
Beginning to think it's not. Maybe one day I'll remain hopeful, but I think for the most part, it's just something that we have to cope with and that we have to work through. And I don't think that it's something that maybe is constantly there, but it's something that rears its ugly head. Like you might feel like you're getting a hold of things and you're feeling better and things are going well and you're confident, and then that imposter just comes right back. So Lauren, if you want to get us started and talk about your experience, and then we'll just kind of work our way around.
Round robin.
Round
Yeah,
robin.
I feel like when I also have what comes along with it is the exposure part of it, of like someone's gonna ask me for this and I'm gonna have to be like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, but I've been doing this for what? First of all, like, what don't I know? And then also, if I don't know it, I always Google or YouTube anyway. So why, like, I'll figure it out, I'll learn it. But for some, it's always you are going to be exposed as a fraud. You don't actually know what you're doing. You're going to have to tell someone, I can't do this. Here's all your money back. Sorry. Like, and that's never happened. That has
No.
never happened.
Mm-mm.
Like, but it's always that like fraud and being exposed and having to admit I don't know what I'm doing is
Yeah.
always looming there with it. It's the funny thing is things are always changing. We are always learning, even if we have been doing something like a certain skill, a certain hobby, a certain job. Almost always a program we're using or how things are done or like how things are shipped, how things are made, how things are streamed. Everything's always changing. So there is always going to be the learning part. And maybe that's where we keep calling ourselves to be like, see, we don't know what we're doing. See, I've been telling myself, you don't know what you're doing. You imposter, you fake. But we always just, as long as you are open to learning and like taking those navigations, you'll always figure it out. So
Yeah.
what, like, why? Why?
It's the ego. It's just
Yep.
it's a fraction of it's the ego trying to protect you in the event that you fail.
Yeah. Mine's always my imposter syndrome comes through the hardest when I do websites and when I do like social media. And I think with social media, it's hard because you're working with these platforms who at the end of the day are businesses. And so you have to learn their algorithms. Things are always changing. And so a lot of times you do feel like nothing I'm doing is working and it's all me. But if you look
Right.
into it, everybody is going through the same things when you're constantly trying to figure out what works best without spending money. And often what works best is spending money. And when you're going to outsmart it, you have to work hard to figure it out. With webs, I don't know what my deal is with websites. I really don't. My very first job, I did their websites and I would code like things to fix different pages and things. I know how to do that. I know how to like create pages from scratch through WordPress and like use their themes, use the things that they offer to make things. But every time I'm like, they only like it because they know you, or they only like it because they like what they see now. But if they ask for something, it's over. It's
Yeah,
over.
you're constantly discrediting yourself. Yeah, it's such a
And then,
vicious cycle. Oh my gosh. So how do you like, what do you do in those moments? Like, do you, I feel like you're aware of it, right?
oh yeah.
And very much so. So what do you do about that?
I feel like I hold my breath and hope for the best. I
Yeah.
don't I think that's one of the things that I have gotten really good at is just taking the chance
Yeah.
and just being like, listen, failure happens. We learn from failure. We learn from mistakes. So I have really just kind of brought my fear along for the ride. Instead of fighting my fear anymore, I have just been like, fear is a useful tool in a lot of ways. It does help to be afraid of things because when I'm thinking things through, but you have to try. And if I don't try, I literally am not doing my job. Like I can't make money. So that probably feels like a horrible answer.
No, no. I mean, it's very logical, honestly. And sometimes we have to bring logic in to it because all the stuff that's going on with the imposter isn't logic. It's not logical.
No.
It's the
Yes. Yeah.
opposite. It's made
Yeah.
up. It's like your mind's making it up to protect you in some really fucked up, weird way. And it's just not, it's like, I think that that's the best way, honestly, to like combat it is I do this a lot of times with just in anxiety in general. Like when I start to get really worked up about something, and imposter syndrome definitely gets me worked up. I kind of have to like be real with myself, and I have to be like, let's break this down a little bit. Like let's take a few steps back because these are lies, and I acknowledge them as this is not me talking.
Right.
This is not me. For example, I have major health anxiety, like major. Like going to the doctor is like a whole ass thing for me, whole ass thing. And all of these things like go, with anxiety, it's like circling around in my mind. It's like a spiral of all these horrible things that could happen. And what, oh my God, what if I get there and I'm really anxious and my blood pressure is really high and then they send me to the ER and like awful stuff because the way that we're in fight or flight in those moments, so it's like our body's having the response as if we're gonna die, and a lot of us kind of live in that when we have anxiety and those triggers come up. So just kind of being like, okay, so has that ever happened?
Mhm.
How many times have you gone to the doctor and your blood pressure has been through the motherfucking roof? Only one time did that happen. But you were 38 weeks pregnant, Carrie, and they said, I think it's time to have a baby now. That's different. Like, and it
Yeah.
just kind of like coaching yourself through it logically. My brother, crazy anxiety. And one day he showed up on my doorstep and he's like, I need your blood pressure cuff. Because he was like convinced himself that he was dying. And I remember I'm like, I'm not giving you that. We're not taking your blood pressure right now. That how in any way is that gonna make you feel better about your situation? And then I just was kind of like, he thought he was having a heart attack. And I had to like, I did exactly that. I like, let's back up the truck a little bit. But you have to do that with imposter syndrome too.
Yeah. And sometimes I will let myself kind of like I'll let myself live there for a moment and I'll be like, okay, let's take a moment and let's think of all the horrible things that could happen. And I think about them and I say, okay, so when this one happens, what will I do? And then I give myself that answer. And then if this one happens, what will I do? And then I go, look, we covered the bases. now we know what to do. And so let's go on. And I had to do that with events because horrible things happen at events. There's really bad people. And like you really do have to have a plan of action. And I would always plan for the absolute worst. And then every time I go, no, nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Nothing
Like, can you believe
happened.
it? And then we
And
go through, and then the next event comes, and the same thing. The
wait,
same.
I have to read this to you because I saw that this morning and it's really funny. And I feel like it's the opposite of what not that we should do, but hold on. So it says worrying works. 90% of the things I worry about never happen.
See, the more
Right.
you worry, the less will happen. Right?
If I when I lean into it just a little bit, not to the point where I am like paralyzed with fear, but when I just kind of think it, I guess it's logic. I put
Yeah,
the logic behind the worry and then I go, great, don't you feel better now? And then we
yeah,
move on.
yeah.
Mm.
Logic works every time.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
what about you, Emily?
I'd say since quitting the corporate world into this spiritual path, I'd say the imposter syndrome is at its highest. I didn't experience it really as much as now. It's because for me, let me see how to put this into words. There's no concrete answer. Like everything I have to all the everything that I get, all the information I get is from spirit. So I have to trust in myself and trust in spirit. Because I was talking to my friend who was a CA, and she's like, at the end of the day, the book balance, it speaks for itself because the book balances. Your job, you don't have that concrete at the end of the day, all of this balances. You're kind of relying on yourself and on spirit to get you the correct answers, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's why I struggle a lot, because it's not black and white. I already struggle with anxiety, so it just adds on. That's like the easiest way that I can explain that it's just not black and white. And I feel like every other job that I've had, it was so much easier to show accomplishments and show, like, to measure success. In this, it's a lot harder. Like you said, people can tell me till they're blue in the face that the reading that I gave was amazing, or I'm a great medium, or past lives, or whatever. But it seems like that just further perpetuates the imposter syndrome rather than lessening it. And I think it's because, like you guys also said, your brain's like, oh, well, they're just saying that to be nice. They just like me as a person. They just, like, I mean, how many times a day does that run through my head? I mean, all day, every day. Like, they're just my friend and they want me to feel better. And even if it's a stranger that's paying, I have to tell myself, Emily, they wouldn't come back and pay you if they were just trying to be nice. Like, there's money involved now. So I have to remind myself that, like anything else, if I wasn't any good, I wouldn't have repeat clients. People wouldn't be willing to pay for my service. So that kind of like brings me back down to earth. But to say that I've, mastered imposter syndrome, or that, I know how to get myself out of it like this, no, I don't. I have no. If anyone has any tips, please write in and let me know, because I'm still learning. I have no idea. Not a clue. I think the key for any job, it's not just this job, but any job, is to kind of, my parents and, my grandparents would always say, fake it till you make it. And I feel like just kind of putting on that smile and just pushing through until, until you got it, is kind of what you have to do. Obviously, I'm not grasping at straws, pulling shit out of my ass, at a reading. But as far as, like, I might be dying inside of anxiety, but on the outside, just looking calm, just reminding yourself, and also I feel like with our job is like, and Carrie, you say this all the time, the way that you're like critiquing yourself is not the way that some person that wants a reading is looking at you. They're not going to remember the one thing or the two things that you get wrong. They're going to remember everything that you get right that you hit. And like myself, even if I'm getting a reading and somebody says something that doesn't quite resonate, I hold on to it because it might resonate later. You know what I mean? So I don't even look at it as they got something wrong. And that's probably how a lot of my clients are, or Carrie's clients are, or, you know, whoever's clients are. They're not looking at it like, God, you know, she said this and that's, but everything else was right. Now they're like, oh my God, she said this and that and blah, blah, blah. And she said this, but I'm going to hold on to, you know, that's how they're looking at the reading. They're
Yeah.
not looking at it as, ugh, they're not, they're picking it apart, because why would they pay for it if they want, if they, that's what they were trying to do. So it's a work in progress over here.
We're just out
Yeah.
here grinning like we're winning and we're hitting our marks because we can do it with a broken heart.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
We're so
God.
depressed we
Love
act like it's our birthday every
every
day.
day. Yes. I love it.
We cry a lot, but we're so productive. It's an art.
It is an
Yep. Oh my. Care Bear, what about you?
Oh God. I mean, you guys basically said all the things. I mean, it's hard. And I think
Mhm.
everybody goes, I think realizing that everybody suffers from it most of the time, unless you are on
Yes.
the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to ego. I think
Yes.
kind of helps make me feel better that even like with my own students, like you're going to come up against it. You're going to
Yeah.
come up against it. And it's
Yep.
something that you're not alone. And, I think like leaning in on other people and like talking through it, because
Yep.
you don't want to sit in it so that it gets to be so big that it's too hard to manage. So I think being
Right.
open and talking to people, because the imposter, like I tell myself this, the imposter does not pay my bills. I pay my bills.
Yep.
So until that imposter comes up with X amount of money a month to keep my family fed and to keep a roof over our head and to keep my kids in school, and then I can't really sit there
Right.
and listen to it. And so I think that helps, but it is a struggle. It has been a year, and I still get just as nervous when I go specifically on a platform like TikTok to do readings, because there's so many people coming in. There's so many people that are incredibly supportive and amazing and yummy, and I want to acknowledge them first. But there's also, complete strangers that you just pop up on their FYP, and they don't know you from Adam, and they're not even into this, and they're judging you, and they're putting nasty stuff in the comments, and they're calling you a fraud. So that certainly doesn't help. And that kind of brings to my next point, like to kind of go along with what Emily said of like, there's no system to this. There's nothing written out. There's no book on it. Like, sure, there's many books on it, but everybody connects differently. Everybody receives their information differently. And there's really
Mhm.
no, like Emily said, black and white way, and it does require trust. But we have to also acknowledge that what we do, it's a lot better, I think, than it was probably 20 years ago, but it's still very taboo. And
Sure.
it still like triggers people, I think. And so we're also coming up against other people's triggers and other people's beliefs. Beliefs are a massive trigger for a lot of people. And there's going to be people that are always going to think it's a scam, and that we're just baiting for money, but we can't control that. Like
Mhm.
we cannot
Right.
control that. We cannot. So I have to remind myself of that too. Like, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm not just walking around tapping into whoever the fuck and giving them a reading. Like that's why my readings are paid. Like,
Right.
you pay me because you want this service. I'm not going to read
Right.
you if you don't want this service, or if you don't believe in it, or whatever. So, like, I think that just kind of, again, bringing logic in. And I have to get really, like, for me, kind of going back to the imposter doesn't pay my bills, like, I have to go up against it, and I have to fight it. And I think that kind of, I have to alchemize it. I have to transmute that energy. And I think so, having like actual pep talks out loud with myself, are really helpful for me. I actually did that last week because I was having a whole day of imposter syndrome. And, I just have to like really talk kindly to myself and out loud, like in those moments, and like show the fuck up for myself when I'm feeling that way. And I think that helps kind of snap me out of it and reminding myself that I didn't just wake up one day and decide that I'm a psychic medium. Like I have put blood, sweat, and tears and a whole lot of money into my development and a whole
Yep.
lot of time. And I have made a shit ton of sacrifices. And I have made this my number one priority so that I can show up for people the best way that I possibly can and give them the reading that they deserve. And I have worked for that. And I have to remind myself, like I didn't just wake up and be like, oh, I'm a psychic medium. Let me pull you some cards. Like, no, like Emily and I both have been in extensive training,
Yep.
hours, hundreds of hours of training, hundreds of hours of practice. And am I wrong sometimes? Of course I'm wrong because I'm human.
Right.
I'm not my accuracy. I don't aim to be 100% because that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I also have to tell myself that, like, let's lower our expectations a little bit. You're a fucking human being. And I tell people that on my live. I had a woman come into my live and I listen, I'm an open book. Like there's no shame. I'm not embarrassed by this. I think it's important to bring this up because this absolutely can happen if you're going on a platform and doing whatever, but specifically this. She came into my live, God love her. I've read her many times and she's typically always had really great readings. And this last time was about a love interest and if she should go on a date with this person. And all the information that I was getting is that she should. And that's what I delivered. Well, it didn't go well. And there were lies and there was illusion and there was deception with this person. And she came into my live and it's the first thing she said is, you were wrong. This person was XYZ. And I kind of took that moment and for a split second, I wanted to fucking crumble and I wanted to melt because I had 30 people in my room. I had like 6 people on my list already that have paid for a reading. Half of them had never gotten a reading from me before. And I was like, you know what? No, I took my power back in that moment. And I said, I'm like, listen, I am not God. I am not above mistakes. I am not above reading energy or something incorrectly. It can happen. However, sometimes there are lessons that we cannot avoid. Sometimes no matter how many I have chills, my God, spirit, no matter how many readings we get or how many cards we pull or however many, whatever, the answer is always going to be the same, even if it ends up being completely the opposite, because you needed to have that experience. And I
Yep.
cannot tell you why or what or how, but that's all I got.
That's
So, I mean, like, and I think like that's really how you need to show up for yourself and like stand on fucking business for yourself because this is our livelihood. And,
Yep.
am I mad at her for doing that? No, I'm not mad at her for doing that. Do I wish that there would have been like an email or a text message? Yes. But you know what? It gave me the opportunity because that needed to happen for me to be able to like stand up for myself and to educate people. It was an opportunity to educate everybody who was in my chat that day. I could have just turned off my live and cried myself to whatever, but no, I ended up like reading 12 people that day. So I think it's all about like, yes, that imposter is always going to be there, but you can stand up to it and you can face it. And it's not bigger than you. And you have to remember that. Like, there's nothing that you can't do. And sure, we all have our moments where, we feel like completely just like we ain't shit, but nobody else can pull you out of that. Nobody else, no amount of validation, no amount of people being like, you're amazing. It doesn't matter. The only person that can really like do that is to do that for yourself.
Yep.
And that's something that I try to do. And sometimes the imposter does win. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do cancel a reading and I reschedule a reading, or sometimes I do, not often, but with privates, but sometimes like with live, it's all up to me, so I won't go on. But I also think it's important for my energy to be where it needs to be, when I'm doing a live. But I really try to make goddamn sure that I get myself out of that headspace as quickly as I can. And I do that by being kind to myself.
Yeah.
And it typically works until it comes back again and rinse and repeat.
But it is a big part of working for yourself. Every
Yeah.
single,
That's another thing, owning a business. I mean, that's the
yes.
whole other separate imposter. Being an
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
And
Yeah.
taking those every single bit, I've had multiple businesses of my own, small and bigger, and every single one of them has had some sort of bad review, bad feedback, project that didn't work because of XYZ. And every single thing I learned from it.
Yeah.
Every single thing. And that's
Yeah.
exactly, I'm so glad you said that just because something didn't work out doesn't mean that it didn't have to happen.
Right.
We learn nothing if we don't try things, if we don't do things. Nothing
Right.
is
And
learned.
like, let's just break that down for a minute. If you feel like you've been talking to somebody and you need to pay for a reading to see, and this is no disrespect for this person, but you're not listening to your intuition. Your intuition is telling you if you should go on a date or not. And it probably was saying that no, but then we're getting readings and it's conflicting our own intuition. Listen, y'all, like you need to listen to your intuition before you listen to anything else. Your intuition should always be first because
Yeah.
it's typically never wrong. But we're just tapping into energy that we're not familiar with. I mean, this is not we don't know everything, but
And I feel like
I
when
love
we're like ignoring our intuition, that's when the universe goes, you know what? I
just
think
go
you do
ahead.
need to do this. This
Yes.
this is the time.
Yeah, to show to yourself, wow, maybe I should have listened. Maybe I should have listened to
Mhm.
myself. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely like, use your resources, lean on your friends. There's so many. I've done every single imposter syndrome meditation you could ever imagine. Listening to really like positive affirmation songs is another really good way. It's just like anything, you have to rewrite the script.
Yeah.
You just have to
Yeah.
rewrite the script. And then like I don't know about you guys, but then when I do it and I show up and I do my readings and then when I get off, I feel really proud. And it might only last a few moments until it's like, I don't know, maybe that reading wasn't that good or maybe blah, blah, blah. But in those moments, they go a really long way.
Yeah. Well,
So
do we want to do a nice round out with a card pool? Leave some
yeah.
nice positive feelings at the end. I have those love notes
Yeah,
next
do
to
a
me.
love note. We'll all do one.
Yeah, do
I'm
that.
gonna do I'm gonna do the elemental empath because I love that deck.
Let's see what comes out. Whoa. Oh boy. Well, hold on. That was a lot. So it says, it's time to rise. No matter what's happening in our lives, we always have the potential to rise above it. Rising is one powerful choice away. Rise out of our negative thoughts or our limiting beliefs. Rise out of our comfort zone or our complaints. Rise out of our slump or out of the potato chip bag. Get up and rise. What are you waiting for, darling?
It's
Get up
so
and
perfect.
rise.
Love
Oh my
it.
God.
It's adorable.
Okay. Okay, so this one is relating and it says comparison, others' projections, and self-reliance. So specific. Okay. This card is all about how we relate to and interact with other people. We all live in our own little bubbles of perception and awareness. Our desires, boundaries, and actions can often clash with those around us. See if you can find balance between learning how to be kind and considerate of the feelings of others while still holding your boundaries and not taking on what isn't yours. The key is to building your self-awareness and your connection to your true self. Grow your bubble of awareness so that you can see the bigger picture. Remember that you are responsible for your actions as well as your reactions, and so is everyone else. In spiritual circles, people will sometimes refuse to take responsibility for how they treat others, claiming that they're not answerable for how others react. While there is partial truth to this, it leaves space for people to think that they can treat people however they want. If you are bullying or projecting your issues onto others, it is up to you to take responsibility for that. On the other hand, if someone is projecting onto you and you aren't comfortable, it is up to you to voice your boundaries. The responsibility goes both ways and can't simply be pinned onto another person. The beauty of relationships is you get to choose what you want to tolerate and where you need the boundary. This card asks you to look at both how you act and react towards those in your life. Be kind while also respecting your own needs. Notice how you might be projecting your triggers onto your relationships, but be sure to give yourself some slack since you are human and are allowed to be imperfect. How do you react when confrontation arises? Remember that most people's actions aren't about you, but rather their own limiting beliefs, perceptions, and insecurities. They are seeing you through their lens, their perception of reality. It is not a complete picture, and you can never hope to please everyone through all of the lenses they see you through. It's an exhausting waste of time. Above all, it's not your problem to make other people see you favorably. You can be a compassionate human being without people pleasing. Not caring what people think is about redefining your core and creating a foundation of self-confidence balanced with self-reflection. It's a really good one.
Love that.
So thank you for tuning in. We really hope that you don't feel like an imposter today. We'll try not to, but we're all human. So thank you for listening. We still have our code with Bite Tag. It's 15% off with the code Team Spirit Pod. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Team Spirit Podcast. Carrie and Emily go live on TikTok and are also on Instagram. You can find Carrie at Clarity by Cam, CAM, and Emily at Enchanted Mystic by MK. And we will see you next time.
Bye.